Marineford arc was arguably one of the greatest and saddest arcs in all of One Piece. However, how different would the story play out if Luffy awakened Gear 5 at Marineford? How would the rest of the series change, and ultimately, would Ace survive in this timeline? Well, to start things off, everything would pretty much stay the same up to the Summit War, where Luffy escaped Impel Down and the others reached Marineford. Hancock already gives Luffy the key to Ace's handcuffs and dashes towards Ace. The other pirates started helping him as well, and all was going well until he landed right in front of the three admirals. At this point in time, the executioners were already about to end Ace's life. Crocodile still managed to take out the executioners before they killed Ace, buying Luffy a little more time. But here's the kicker, you see. In the original timeline, Luffy was instantly attacked by Kuzan during this time and was saved by Marco. But in this timeline, Marco's too far away. And after Kuzan injured Luffy with his ice spear, and then he instantly got hit by Kizaru's kick that was as fast as the speed of light. This instantly knocked Luffy out. A bunch of other lower-ranked Whitebeard pirates tried to stop the admirals as they closed in, but they were too weak and instantly thrown away. However, in the background, Luffy is undergoing his transformation. I asked before how Luffy is going to save Ace from his fate, right? Well, this is it. Everyone was hearing drum beats all of a sudden, and Luffy's body was releasing white smoke, and then it turned into streaks of black lightning from a sudden burst of Conqueror's Haki, which knocked out a large number of low-ranked Marines. The drums of liberation were beating faster, and Luffy started smiling. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, even though it's so early in the story, Luffy is achieving Gear 5 and awakens his Devil Fruit, turning the Gomu Gomu no Mi into the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika. Luffy's entire clothes and hair became white, and Whitebeard quickly realized that he transformed into the living embodiment of Joy Boy. You see, Whitebeard already knew that there was a prophecy and that one person was going to change the world. He specifically stated to Sengoku someday, a man will bear the weight of all these generations and he will challenge this world. Mid-war, Luffy may have convinced Whitebeard that he was that man, and that's why he ordered all of the commanders of the Whitebeard pirates to help Luffy. It might also have a connection with what Ivanko said to Luffy, that Whitebeard was testing him, and it might be because he had a feeling that if Luffy could pull this off, he might be the one who was in the prophecy that Roger shared with him. So when Whitebeard saw Luffy use Gear 5, he knew that everything Roger said was true, and that Luffy was the one who would rebel against this world. He ordered every single Whitebeard pirate to help Luffy, but also didn't get in his way because his abilities as of now are unknown. Whitebeard himself even joined in the attack. In terms of the others, everyone, including Sengoku and Garp, was shocked. The Marines started retreating as the ground turned into rubber, and when Kuzan tried attacking Luffy again with an ice sword, his weapon became rubber, and he was instantly blown away with one punch. Luffy instantly jumped up so high that when he landed, he was already near the execution platform, and that's when Garp met him. In the original timeline, Garp wouldn't let Luffy pass, but he might be too shocked to even make a move. Not that it matters, because no matter what he does, he can't possibly beat Gear 5 Luffy, who can literally turn anything into rubber. Luffy keeps moving, and that's when he meets Sengoku. Now, unlike Garp, Sengoku knows something related to the Void Sentry, and it might be the Will of the Deep. There were a couple of times where this was hinted. The first one was, of course, Whitebeard's final speech in the original timeline, and Sengoku was even surprised when Law asked him what the D meant. The biggest evidence when it comes to this is Sengoku's Viver card. In there, you can find that he knows the government's biggest secrets, including the annihilation of Ohara, the truth behind the D-Clan, and that people with D in their name have a set fate. So when he saw that Luffy resembled the sun god Nika, he knew something was up. I can't tell for sure if Sengoku would let Luffy reach Ace. I think he'd try a half-hearted attack, but it would ultimately be countered by Luffy. And just like Garp, Sengoku would stand on the sidelines. Galdino would give the wax key to Luffy, and then he'll instantly unlock Ace's handcuffs. At this point, I think the fighting would have completely stopped, and everyone's eyes would have been locked towards Luffy. Everyone would be too stunned at what just happened, seeing as Luffy not only walked past Garp, the hero of the Marines, but also Sengoku, the fleet admiral. The only person that I think would even dare to get in Luffy and Ace's way would be Sakazuki. He and a bunch of other vice admirals would probably try to attack Luffy and Ace. However, before he could, Whitebeard was already behind him, and he got slammed into the ground. He tries to attack Whitebeard, but he'll instantly be stomped by Luffy one way or another. From the podium, Sengoku would say that the war is over, which surprised most of the Marines that were present. But he did this because Luffy is still unstable and might destroy the entirety of Marineford if he wasn't careful, causing the deaths of so many unnecessary lives. The war would end before Shanks even got there, but there's no doubt in my mind that the news about Luffy's transformation would reach him, and we all know that he knows something regarding what Roger discovered at Laugh Tale, and it might have been that he most likely also knew the true nature of the Gomu Gomu no Mi, because why would he raid a world government ship for no reason to? As the war ended, the Whitebeard pirates retreated, and with them was Luffy, who was unconscious because he had recently just turned off Gear 5. It's probable that Luffy's going to be in critical condition because he had a lot of wounds, and his physical stats are not as good as the ones he had when he was in Wano. The Whitebeard pirates with Jinbei might take care of Luffy. This means that he won't go to Amazon Lily and most probably won't meet Silver's Rayleigh, who was instrumental in teaching him the fundamentals of Haki, since he was no longer with his teammates after they were were separated in Sabaody Archipelago, communicating with them became even harder. In the original timeline, Luffy communicated with them using his tattoo when he, Rayleigh, and Jinbei circled Marineford as a custom for burials, where he was on the front page of a newspaper. This makes things even more confusing. They have no way to communicate that they'll be meeting in the Sabaody Archipelago after a set amount of time. But because he saved Ace, Whitebeard was indebted to him. Whitebeard offered to put Luffy under his protection and then train him, and after 2 years, he can do whatever he wants. Not only that, through Whitebeard's connections, Luffy is able to send a message through the newspapers with a hidden message for his crew that they'll meet in Sabaody Archipelago after 2 years. And so the time skip starts. Luffy trained with every single commander of the Whitebeard pirates, and on occasion, he would mostly spar with Ace. During the Summit War, Ace was already pretty strong enough to once be called a warlord of the sea, so right now, he'll become even stronger. And because Luffy is training with the legendary Whitebeard, Luffy has become increasingly efficient at using haki. However, it might not be as good as when Rayleigh taught him. Once his training is done, Luffy returns to Sabaody Archipelago. To make things more interesting, I'd say that by this point in time, Jinbei and Ace were accompanying him. I think Ace would ask Whitebeard to let him stay with his brother so that not only could he repay him, but also so that he could see Luffy's dream come true firsthand. Of course, in this timeline, Whitebeard would agree to this. And when the Straw Hats reunited, they already had one new member, Ace, one of the strongest pirates in the New World. This not only made the Straw Hats literally have more firepower, but now they have someone who can help them navigate the New World. And it just so happens that Ace has been to Wano. Before we go to that part though, there's one crew that has been negatively affected by everything that has happened so far. And I think you might have an idea of who it is. It's none other than Blackbeard. Because Luffy immediately got Gear 5, the Blackbeard pirates were unable to get the Gura Gura no Mi from Whitebeard because he didn't die. And most likely by this point, they might not have grown as strong as they are in the original timeline. Blackbeard wouldn't have taken the rest of Whitebeard's territory since the strongest man in the world was still alive. Going back to the Straw Hats, they were now engaged in a battle against the new Fishman pirates at Gyeoncord Plaza, and things would go even smoother than in the original timeline because of Ace's presence. Luffy would still show off his conqueror's haki and knock out 50,000 fishmen, and then immediately he'd fight Hody while the rest of the Straw Hats fight the rest. Hody easily loses against Luffy, and Jinbei might not even have to save Luffy's life when he donates his blood. As the Straw Hats depart from Fishman Island, this is where things get pretty interesting. You see, because of Ace's presence, there's a chance the Straw Hats won't ever get to Punk Hazard. Why? Well, since Luffy has been more popular and the world government is constantly hunting him, they might have to avoid highly volatile areas like that, especially since Gear 5 was there. This would mean that they won't fight against Caesar and probably won't even meet Momo and Kinemon. This changes the entirety of the story, because these characters, along with Law, who Luffy also meets in Punk Hazard, are essential in the fight for the liberation of Wano. So what happens next after this? Well, one thing I could think of is that they completely go towards Zoo because of the hailstorm. A lot of things would occur because of this sudden shortcut. Aside from not meeting Momo, Law, and Kinemon, Dressrosa would ultimately fall into Doflamingo's hands, and Law might also perish there. Momo would stay as one of Caesar's test children, and I don't actually even care what happens to Kinemon. If Law decides to stop Caesar, then Momo and Kinemon could escape, but that's a highly unlikely scenario since Caesar is basically untouchable by the Marines due to his immunity under Doflamingo. However, since Law is crazy enough to sacrifice everything just to get his revenge for Corazon, he might just put a stop to all of Caesar's research, freeing Momo in the process, where Momo would then reunite with Kinemon one way or another. I'd like to think that's the exact scenario that happens, and Law loses his life in the process. What's even worse is that we won't see the birth of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet because Luffy was never involved in the Kurita Coliseum event to get the Flame Fruit, since Ace is still alive. He wouldn't have met Barto and the others, which is just a bummer, to be honest. Both Ace and Luffy also wouldn't know that Sabo was still alive and was a part of the Revolutionary Army for the same reason. Kinemon and Momo might first meet the Straw Hats in Zoo along with Kanjuro. By that time, Luffy would also get the news that Law was killed by Doflamingo. He might try to go back to Dressrosa, but it would be too late, and after a talk with Ace, Luffy would decide to keep going. Now, this is where things get tricky because by this point in time, Sanji would have disappeared and only left a letter, triggering the Straw Hats to go to Whole Cake Island. What I think would happen here is that Sanji would still try to leave, but he would be stopped by the other Straw Hats, saying that they'll solve this problem together. I could see Zoro and Sanji fighting for a bit until Ace or Luffy stop them. Moving on to the story in Zoo, almost everything is the same with them meeting the Minks, but everyone is mostly safe because we skipped an entire arc, meaning Jack hasn't attacked Zoo yet. That's why, while the Straw Hats were traveling around Zoo, that's when Jack attacked. But instead of completely destroying Zoo and oppressing its citizens, he was faced by the Straw Hats. This would be their first encounter against the Beast Pirates, and Ace would immediately notify Luffy that they were fighting one of Kaido's top dogs. The battle was intense, with Luffy and Ace fighting Jack, while the Straw Hats and the fighters within Zoo fought off Jack. It was a hard battle, but since Ace and Luffy were there, and Luffy had Gear 5 at his disposal, someone like Jack wasn't enough to beat them, so the Beast Pirates retreated. This is the part where the Straw Hats meet the rest of the samurai, and also discover that that Kaido and Big Mom had one road poneglyph. Ace, Luffy, and Momo also experienced hearing the voice of all things for the first time through their communication with Zunisha. As their time in Zoo ended, the Alliance split up just like in the original timeline. But the people who would accompany Luffy would change. You see, in the original timeline, the ones who would help Luffy retrieve Sanji were Nami, Chopper, and Brook. But since Sanji is still here and Ace is here too, they'd have to mix it up a bit. Ace, Sanji, Brook, and Chopper, along with Pedro, would help Luffy while the rest joined the others. This is not a massive change, but with Ace just being by Luffy's side, the entire flow of the whole Cake Island arc will be affected. Oh, Carrot's there with them too. On another note, the attack on the Revolutionary Army's HQ on Baltigo won't occur because the Blackbeard pirates were not strong enough to do it. And if they did, they would just get completely wiped out. The Straw Hats arrive at Totoland, and that's when they meet Sanji's siblings Yanji and Reiju. In the original timeline, the encounter was mostly non-violent, but since Sanji was here with them, things got heated. When Reiju and Yanji saw Sanji, insults were thrown by Reiju, and this did not sit well with Luffy. Luffy instantly punched Yanji, and because he punched a prince of the Germa Empire, trouble was about to arrive at the Straw Hats' doorsteps. Seeing this, Sanji stopped the two parties from fighting each other. He told Reiju and Yanji that he'd willingly come with them if they didn't hurt his friends. Of course, Luffy was totally against this, but when he tried to stop Sanji kicked him in the face, which also angered Ace. Pedro was the one who told everyone to keep calm, and using this moment, Sanji jumped toward the Germa ship and went away with his siblings. This would be the trigger that forces the Straw Hats to go deeper into Big Mom's territory, where they eventually meet Charlotte Pudding. Pudding reveals to them the reason why Sanji has been acting that way. He was asked to marry her. That's when, just like what happened in the main series, the team split up again. Pedro and Brook tried to find Big Mom's road poneglyph, while Luffy and the rest continued to find Sanji. They encounter Randolph and Broly, and they find Pound in the commotion. That's when Cracker appeared. But things won't be as desperate as before. You see, Cracker's main ability is that he can have the Bisu Bisu no Mi, which allows him to create and manipulate biscuits. But those biscuits are particularly weak against low-Gia type Devil Fruit users like Ace, because if you remember, Kuzan easily defeated him when he was ambushed by the Blackbeard pirates. Now, what happens is that instead of Luffy, Ace is the one who fights Cracker, and the same thing happens. No matter how many biscuit puppets Cracker throws at him, Ace just instantly burns all of them. And by the end, the battle didn't even last more than an hour. While Ace was fighting Cracker, Nami and Luffy met Sanji. And like in the main timeline, Sanji kicked Luffy and Luffy didn't fight back. An army of Big Mom pirates comes at them, and Luffy is defeated by Charlotte Counter and Cadenza. However, because Ace made it back in time, he was able to distract the remaining Big Mom pirates and managed to retreat with both Luffy and Nami. Ace tried to convince Luffy to leave Sanji and that Sanji had already betrayed his crew, but Luffy was having none of it and immediately rampaged through Big Mom's castle, where he saw Reiju, who told him the truth. After some time, Luffy met Sanji, and after Sanji told him that he couldn't come back, Luffy punched him and Sanji broke down. The Straw Hats meet with Jinbei and the Fire Tank pirates, and the attack against Big Mom begins. The assassination fails because of Big Mom's screams, and as the Alliance retreats, the battle against Katakuri begins. However, Luffy has Gear 5. Instead of completely running away, the Alliance separated Big Mom and Katakuri, the Big Mom pirates' two strongest fighters. Ace dealt with Katakuri while Luffy fought Big Mom, and it looked like it became a war instead of an assassination. Luffy instantly activated Gear 5 and used this to fight Big Mom on even ground. The battle lasted for hours, and it looked like a stalemate was about to be the result of their struggle. Katakuri and Ace were fighting inside the Mirror World, but something insane immediately happened. Ace awakened his Devil Fruit, allowing him to turn the entire Mirror World into a fiery blaze, slowly melting Katakuri whenever he transformed his body into Mochi. Luffy was also slowly gaining the upper hand against Big Mom because of the insanely overpowered abilities that Gear 5 has. What made their odds even better was the arrival of Germa 66, helping them defeat the Big Mom pirates, or even just Big Mom herself. The battle continued, and even as more and more Big Mom pirates started pouring in, they were still being held back by the Alliance. As time went on, Luffy pulled Mother Carmel's broken portrait again, and this gave him the opening he needed to knock out Big Mom. Although this didn't kill her, it effectively ended the battle as the Big Mom pirates slowly lost morale. Subsequently, Luffy also lost all his stamina and returned to normal. With the help of Ace and Germa 66, the Alliance was able to retreat. As they were being ambushed, Judge, along with Watatsumi, made sure they escaped safely. This is when Jinbei stayed behind, and the promise between him and Luffy to meet again in Wano was formed. Jinbei also became an official Straw Hat member like Ace. The next arc is Wano, one of the most exciting arcs in the entire series, and believe me, things are going to become even crazier. They met Tama, and instead of her fainting from pure sadness because Ace died, they instead had a happy reunion. Now, I'm going to skip some of the parts that happen here because it would be boring, and because the same things are more or less going to happen, with the only changes being that it would be easier for the Straw Hats, and that Law was no longer here. Ace and Luffy would separate to cover more ground, and that's when Luffy loses to Kaido for the first time. That's where he meets Kid, and they form an alliance. alliance. Fast forwarding the story, we arrive at the raid on Onigashima. The Straw Hats, along with the rest of their ninja pirate mink samurai alliance, including the Kid Pirates, learned that when the Big Mom knew Luffy was here, she formed an alliance with Kaido to get revenge. Jinbei also arrived, and with Luffy at the lead, the alliance started the attack against Kaido and Big Mom. Now again, the same things occur with Law just being replaced by Ace. But things become interesting when the fight against Kaido and Big Mom begins. Ace already awakened his Devil Fruit, making him even stronger. And now Luffy already had Gear 5. He activated it quite early, and it shocked Kaido as well. Killer, Zoro, Ace, Luffy, and Kid faced off against the two Emperors of the Sea, and the battle was a spectacle. Luffy and Ace were fighting Kaido, while Killer, Zoro, and Kid fought Big Mom. Luffy was already overpowering Kaido, but he isn't called the strongest creature in the world for nothing, because he was tanking every hit. Soon, though, things took a turn for the worst. Wait, how do things become worse, right? I mean, Luffy already has the most OP Devil Fruit in the world, and Ace was arguably a better help than Law was. So why? Well, you know that the world already knew about Luffy way back in Marineford, right? Well, this caused quite a stir in the world government, and in the original timeline, it was stated that the Gorosei were willing to even anger Kaido just to stop the world from learning the truth. Surrounding Kaido, Big Mom, and the others were black circles, and out of them came the 5 Gorosei. Everyone was so confused as to what was happening, but then the Gorosei transformed into their awakened Zoan forms, shocking the pirates. Annoyed because they ruined his fight, Kaido started walking towards them, and as he attacked, he was joined by Luffy. But in an instant, both of them were blown away by the Gorosei. The other Gorosei attacked them, and they were only saved because Ace generated a firewall that protected them. Because of this sudden surprise attack from the world government, Kaido and the others agreed to a ceasefire and a temporary alliance. King also arrived and informed them that Onigashima was surrounded by marine ships, and even the admirals were coming. What's even worse was that they were with the Blackbeard pirates. Why are they here? Well, Blackbeard told the Marines that he wanted to help them in exchange for safety, but in truth, he wanted to hunt down strong Devil Fruit users and get them for himself. Kaido then ordered King to tell all beast pirates to stop attacking the samurai, minks, and pirates and focus their attention on the Marines. Although everyone thought it was a trick at first, they soon realized that it was all too real as the Marines started bombarding Onigashima with cannon fire. All of the admirals were also there, including Fujitora and Green Bull. Caught off guard, the Marines slowly gained ground and were pushing back the alliance. But then music starts playing in the background and a friendly face appears. It is the one and only Whitebeard. The sea and ground immediately started shaking, and when the admirals turned around, they could see the entire Whitebeard pirates racing toward Onigashima as well. Not only that, the Whitebeard pirates were with the giant pirates who came because they heard that Joy Boy was fighting and they wanted to help. This is all-out war, and the stakes have never been higher. Onigashima is poised to become the second Marineford, or more accurately, the second God's Valley. The battle continues, and Luffy and the others, with the help of Kaido and Big Mom, fight for their survival against the Gorosei. Now, I can't go into much detail here since the only Gorosei we saw using his abilities is Saint Saturn, but what we do know is that they're extremely durable to the point that even after a few hits against Gear 5 Luffy, Saint Saturn was still in the fight. Now, Big Mom's sole focus can't do anything here because her targets need to fear her. That's why I think she's going to rely a lot on her homies when it comes to attacks. Not to mention, Kaido might instantly pull out his Conqueror's Haki-imbued hybrid form. The intensity escalates as Whitebeard lands on Onigashima and takes on the admirals with the giant pirates captains Dory and Brogy. After reinforcements arrive, the fight appears to be turning in the Alliance's favor as more powerful characters like Whitebeard's commanders and Kaido's all-stars join the fray. However, Sakazuki proves to be a formidable adversary, just like in the main timeline during Marineford, with his Devil Fruit proving highly destructive and landing clean hits on Whitebeard himself. The Marines are overwhelmed, but every victory the Alliance achieves comes at a great cost in lives. Meanwhile, the Blackbeard pirates become even more troublesome by targeting Devil Fruit users, making the Alliance vulnerable. But it's not over yet. During the Wano arc, we constantly saw the Big Mom pirates attempting to reach Wano, but being repelled by King. Now, with King occupied, they are contacted by the Whitebeard pirates and are on their way! Alongside them are Germa 66 and the Kuja pirates, aiming to aid Sanji and Luffy. However, have you ever wondered what would happen if this occurred after Egghead? I mean, if it makes sense. And because Ivankov and Luffy made contact during Marineford, the Revolutionary Army might also come. What happens here is that they arrive after the Big Mom pirates group, and Dragon and Saabo join Luffy and the others in fighting the Gorosei. This gives them a better chance at surviving, but as we all know, the pirates aren't the only ones who could summon reinforcements. It is none other than the God's Knights. Moments after the fighting begins, the Gorosei feel that the tide of the battle is against them, so they instantly summon the God's Knights to even the playing field. We actually don't know how strong the God's Knights are, but if they have the authority to casually execute a celestial dragon like Don Quixote Mjosgard, then they must be quite formidable. This spells a lot of trouble for the Alliance because their only hope now is that either Luffy, Big Mom, Kaido, and the others manage to defeat the Gorosei, or another strong crew arrives to back them up. I know, the Whitebeard pirates and the giant pirates are already insanely OP assets, but Consider just how much damage the admirals could do, especially when combined with the God's Knights. Some of you might be thinking that Shanks might arrive, but who's to say that he's not secretly working for the world government, especially since he has links to the Supreme Commander of the God's Knights? Will he join the pirates, or will he betray Luffy? Well, at the time of making this video, we just don't have enough information. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button for more One Piece content.